There's so much that we can learn from Wicked about ourselves, the world, and other people, and especially with regard to what does it actually mean to be good? And what does it actually mean to be bad or wicked? We're going to break that down from a psychological standpoint for you today.
And we all have the ability to become wicked for sure. But how mindful are you on being wicked? How mindful are you on being good? Let's find out.
Hey everybody, it's Bianca.
Welcome back, Evolvers. It's Emilia. Bianca and I are going to get into a new throng of episode for all of our Evolvers out there, adding a little spice, something nice to the episode lineup to spice things up a little bit, but also because she and I have found a new shared love for films through Evolve Movie Club. And what we've realized is that there's so much more depth when it comes to films that these conversations that we have in Movie Club are just scratching the surface. So today, dear listener, you are going to get a psychological analysis of Wicked for Good and understanding who really was wicked. But more than that, you're going to walk away from this episode really contemplating some of the deeper elements about the film, about the characters, and about the story arc in general that we have come up day to day in our lives over and over again. And if we're not mindful, these sneaky traps will kind of have us falling into the same traps that, yes, Elphaba and Glinda did as well. So Bianca, before we get into the Movie Club original kind of story, shall we say, I want to make sure that our listeners kind of understand our experience with each film and kind of what our film experience was like prior to getting into this. So, dear listener, this is going to be, like I said, a new segment of episodes that Bianca and I are going to be doing. And should you have suggestions on films that you believe we should be talking about, please go ahead and comment down in YouTube in the comment sections what that film is and what you're interested in. We're always wanting to add value to you. So with that being said, Bianca, I think this film I had watched in IMAX theaters, and we didn't do 3D
Both
this time.
of them?
No, the first, so Wicked, the first one, I want to say I watched at home. And when I say at home, I also need to share, like, I am kind of spoiled. I had gotten Alan a 115-inch projector screen that we have up on our cathedral ceilings, which is really, really awesome. And I am such a big fan of bringing the theater to home as opposed to going out to the theater. So you and I might differ in that. I'm not a big go to the movie theaters kind of gal, but we went for Wicked for Good to the movie theaters. It was IMAX. It was one of those things that Alan adores, going to the movie theaters, despite his movie theater at home. And after this movie, I practically said I'm never going to the theaters ever again. And I won't go too much into detail as to why. It was just kind of a shit show, for lack of better words. But what I will say is that the film experience at the movie theaters in IMAX, I mean, it doesn't get any better than that other than 3D or 4D. And holy crap, what a film. From the beginning, and obviously because we had Movie Club, I had my remarkable taking notes and whatnot, but there were moments where I was butt on the edge of my seat. I was crying. I was weeping. I was just like boo-hooing in that like ugly cry that just is so necessary. And just what the film brought up and out of me was so visceral. And I remember the car ride home. We couldn't stop talking about the film to the extent where we were on our way to the gym afterwards. And I was just like, babe, this is the dumbest idea. We shouldn't be going to the gym. We should be like emotionally and psychologically processing what journey this film just brought us on. Like, I need to like be in this. And we had a great conversation after that. But that was my film experience. Absolutely recommend this film. Bianca, what was yours and obviously we'll go into the deeps of it, but what was your film experience?
The first one I watched at my parents' house with my sister. I think it was their new house.
Okay.
maybe. I don't know. Whatever. It doesn't matter. I watched it with my sister and I was really excited for the movie, but I wasn't like as diehard of a fan of it as I am now. So after seeing the first one, I just could not wait for the second one to come out. So then when the second one came out, I think I saw it Thanksgiving Day. So I opted out of Thanksgiving this year and I wanted to make sure that I did something that was very aligned for me in regard to that day and giving thanks and what, just I wanted that day to be for me. So I went, I spent the day with myself and then I went at night and I was actually pretty surprised at how many people were there. It was pretty impressive.
Really? Wow.
It was packed because it had come out like a couple of days before that. So I think it came out the 21st, potentially. And then I went and saw it on the 25th, the 26th, whenever that Thursday was.
Gotcha.
And it was at, I don't think, was it IMAX? No. Blackstone is an IMAX, right? Or no, maybe it is. I don't know.
Girl,
whatever.
I don't know. You got to move.
No, it was because they had the bougie chairs and now they have all the chairs they can they recline.
Oh,
so it's like
yeah,
the
those are
very
good.
expensive, the very nice chairs that recline. And I was like,
Those are nice.
oh my God. Because I haven't been
Living
to
your
the
best
movies
life.
in I don't know how long. So I go
Really?
in and I'm like, oh my God. This is amazing. The seats completely recline. I'm like laying back. It was wonderful.
Oh, yeah, those are awesome. Yeah.
So I'm like around all of these kids and these families and these like older adults too. Like I was really surprised at like the demographic of people that was in there. It was everyone under the sun. As soon as the movie started, I'm like geeking out in my chair. I'm like getting so excited. And by the end of it, I'm hysterically crying. I'm boo-hooing. It was so ugly. And I drive home and I'm just like shook. I'm like,
Yeah.
what the
It's one of those
actual
experiences.
hell?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, what did I just process?
Oh
All
my
this
God.
stuff that I haven't processed for my whole life. Thank you, film directors.
Seriously, brutal. And then I watched it again, I think a couple of weeks after that. So I went to the same theater and I watched it again and it was just better the second time.
Why was it better the second time?
Because when you watch something the first time, you're just like, you're seeing it for the first time. So you're just excited about the experience in and of itself. But when you watch it the second time, you can see it at a deeper level than you could the first time after the initial excitement wears off. So I was just able to pick up on things better the second time than I was the first time, which made it that much better for me.
Yeah. I can definitely resonate with that. I think that seeing a film for the first time, it's that all that novelty and new experience. It's just that exposure. Like you're just like dopamine squirting all over the place and you're just like, oh, give me all the dopamine. And your brain is like kind of distracted of all those like little nuances that don't get picked up on until the second time or third time around. I love watching film, really exceptional, extraordinary films the second and third time around for that very specific point, because you realize how much your dopamine can distract you, right? When you're in a new novel experience, you realize how much it can distract you from so much of the meaning that is film. And with a film like Wicked and Wicked 2, both exceptional in terms of the color and the costumes and the sets and the theatrics and the drama. There's just, and it's such an imaginative world and it has such a long-standing narrative that has existed for quite some time. You realize it's just like there's a whole new world that your brain is opening up to and freaking out about. So the second time around, let me ask you this, was that before or after Movie Club that you had watched the second time?
I think I watched it again the weekend before Movie Club.
Okay.
I think.
Okay. So you watched it with the Movie Club questions in mind, is likely the case. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
So Movie Club was the first. When did I go see this movie? I tended to track it.
Okay. While you do that, I want to share. So anyone that's listening, so you likely saw it with the 3 questions. So I'm going to share with everyone what the 3 questions that we talked about in Movie Club, the discussion that we had around this film was. Number 1, which part of you has been misunderstood, and what might it look like to honor its truth instead of suppress it? Number 2, how do you discern between loyalty to self and loyalty to others when they conflict? Mm-hmm. And then number 3, where in your life have you felt punished or misunderstood for doing what was right rather than what was accepted? And those 3 films I had gone into IMAX actually watching from those 3 questions. So for lack of better words, I had primed my brain to pick up on these for the first time. So I don't think I had this similar parallel experience to you. I was trying to navigating the dopamine while also watching from the Evolve lens. So on the second time, now that you have the data, did you watch it from the 3 lens of the questions, Movie Club questions?
Yeah, I did. When I went in the second time. So the first time I was just excited about it. And then the second time I went in and I was actually looking at it from the lens of Movie Club and the experience.
So the real question that I'm sure all of us are asking at this point, did we not go to the movie theaters dressed up as either Glinda or Elphaba? I'm sure you're asking this. And I'm so sorry to disappoint. I did neither. Bianca, did you dress up as either?
I went as the Munchkin men. the Munchkin lady.
That's hilarious. Hilarious. Okay.
My hair was just a mess. I was in my little sweatpants and sweatsuit so no one would come near me, and my glasses just looked like a little munchkin.
Fabulous. Well, we love this. And so fun. So, okay, let's actually get into the meat and potatoes of this episode, shall we? So we did not dress up as Glinda nor Elphaba, and nor did either of us dress up as Oz or an animal. We were just our gremlin selves out in public so that no one would come near us. But so this psychological analysis of Wicked for Good is what Bianca and I really felt compelled to do because, like I said, after Movie Club, so Movie Club had those 3 discussion questions, was a phenomenal Movie Club, and I shout out to every single person who joined Movie Club. That was great. If you're interested in joining Movie Club for our next Movie Club film, please comment below Evolve Movie Club or send us a DM. There is a link also in the show notes to become a member. It's totally free. But that discussion was one of the most powerful discussions that I remember. The container that we created was a transformational experience for so many of us that were in Wicked and in the Movie Club for Wicked for Good. And we actually had a new member, BC, shout out to you, who had joined, and he didn't even see the film, and he was in that room and was able to contribute to the conversation. So one of the things that we love about Movie Club is that you don't have to see the film in order to have that transformational experience of a discussion around a film, because ultimately it is that space is designed so that we can all transport based on the discussions that we undergo. But you and I both felt afterwards, we just scraped the surface of this film. And so that's why we wanted to do not only this episode, but also make sure that after we also get into some of the most heavy hitting films and do a deep psychological analysis on such. So that being said, where do we get started on this? Bianca, what first compels you to talk about? Because I know you and I had done some prep for this episode, and we have so many different avenues that we said we wanted to go into.
You and I kind of live this movie from a much different lens than I think many people have and will and do because of the women that we've become and the work that we are doing in the world, and you in particular and me following your lead. You were always the truth teller, in all of like to a fault. You were always the truth teller, and you were always the person who was trying to do good. And very similar to Elphaba, you were just so belligerently and wrongfully attacked and judged and harmed and villainized, and the people around you were martyred while you were persecuted against. And being on this journey, I've kind of ended up in the same boat. It's like what we're trying to do here at Evolve is really change people's lives for good, help people to develop into the best versions of themselves possible and heal from trauma and heal from the core wounds that have been really destroying their lives, and helping them to see truth behind the mask, behind the facade, behind all of the BS that we see on the day-to-day on social media and in the news and whatever the case may be. And it's come with so much harm. It's come with so much risk. It's come with so much, just so much that I never thought in a million years would happen. It's like we're trying to help people, but we're the ones getting attacked. We're trying to help people, but we're the ones that are being told we're manipulators and we're deceitful and we're all of these terrible things. And that's why I was bawling my eyes out in that movie. Like growing up, I was Glinda. And as a part of this mission, I've become very similar to, just metaphorically speaking, to the character Elphaba. And you've always been Elphaba, but everyone thought you were Glinda. And when Alan said that in movie club, your jaw hit the floor. You're like, what?
Well, because the quote unquote looks are very deceptive, right? They put me in this category of pretty girl, blue eyes, white woman, whatever your stereotype is of that, right? And so many people, I mean, we've talked about this behind the scenes. So many people have really horrible experiences with the quote unquote pretty or popular girl, right? And pretty equals mean, pretty equals inauthentic, pretty equals, everyone has a narrative about that. And then you and I have had conversations where for people, a white woman is not safe, or a white woman was actually, the only woman that was the teacher that helped me feel safe, right? There's so many different narratives that people have. And 100%, I think one of the timeless lessons that this film really brought forward was, and so many people, especially in the Evolve community, definitely felt, is that Elphaba's character showcased she was different, but she had this like defining difference, which was actually a trauma. And that trauma, from my perspective, is very similar to what I know that I experienced, but had been very much gaslit in my life to distance from, which is like that premature moral labeling that people have, which is that quote unquote, if you have a visible marker of you being other than or different than or not like everyone else, your identity becomes this quote unquote externalizing connection point before you even have agency to take control of your own. So like, for example, Elphaba, it was her green skin, and the externalization of that made her quote unquote othered. It was this like visible marker of her being different from everyone else. And what that ultimately created, which I experienced as well in my experience, is this hyper moral conscientiousness and consciousness that ultimately showed up in this belief within self of I must be good to justify my existence. And you and I have talked about this behind the scenes, but one of my biggest core beliefs that I held, which again, this parallels, was I must make sure that I'm good and serving others. Otherwise, what is my purpose here on life? And so it creates this kind of split here between, am I going to go and live in my truthful version of myself, or am I going to live in that quote unquote acceptable version of myself so that I have belonging, right? So it moves this sense of agency and autonomy and identity in a very different direction that I know a lot of people can resonate with if they have any external marker that puts them in that quote unquote otherness, right? So like, for example, you've talked on the air before about like growing up, like there are certain external quote unquote things that made you feel different than others, you know, or ways in which you operated as a young kid that made you feel othered. And so these stigmatizing identities of whatever that look equals to, again, pretty equals this, dark facial hair equals that, like all these different elements, immediately when you're quote unquote othered in a society, inherently quote unquote you're wicked in other people's consciousness. And so that is really, really difficult of an experience. And it was Elphaba shared in this film so deeply what that was like. And Cynthia Erivo, who has an actual ridiculously long name, she's actually not born wicked. She's just declared incompatible with the society that she grew up in. And I know a lot of people feel that way, feeling like they are othered. Whereas Glinda, for example, and I had other friends that like very much modeled Glinda and her performative way of belonging, right? Like, so Glinda was someone who her goodness in contrast to Elphaba's. I have some of my notes here that I had written down from the movie. So if I'm looking down, that's kind of what I'm looking at. But Glinda really created this like performative, non-intrinsically good version of her sense of self. So she was rewarded for alignment with the bigger systems at play, not truth. And that's where their relationship, it actually was like this nervous system tuning fork, because Glinda was this very much the person who was, let me fawn first so that I can get my needs met, or so that I can get accepted into the university, Shiz University, or so that I can finally do what my heart wants to do, which is practice magic, as opposed to Elphaba's character, who leaned very much towards that anxious avoidant attachment style. And she had that deeper longing of acceptance, but only really found that in some of these pockets where she was able to be alone. So,
or with other othered characters. So like Dr. Dillamond, for example. Dr. Dillamond attached to her very early on because she spoke up. She embodied truth. She was very forthcoming and spoke out against the wrongdoings that were happening to him.
Right.
And the other characters in the movie that were also very wrongly marginalized and being attacked and blamed for the horrible things that were going on, which was basically all a facade to hide what was really going on behind the scenes. Elphaba was not only othered by society, but she was othered by her family. And that's what made it hard too. There's one thing if you grow up in a home where you're experiencing love and nurturance, but there's this other aspect to you that you're experiencing out in the world. You're going to have a much very different experience of life because you have a safe, stable home base, as opposed to what happened with Elphaba and what happens, unfortunately, with a lot of people, where you're attacked at home and you're attacked out in the outside world. And even more unfortunately, when things like that happen, more often than not, people don't end up developing a strong embodied sense of self the way that Elphaba did. What ends up happening is they end up becoming shells of themselves, trying to either hide away from the world or fawn and appease so that they can feign belonging in whatever environments that they can find themselves in. And
right.
this isn't Emilia and I will use ourselves as examples in this show, but it's not because we need you to care about us. It's just because those are the most prevalent examples that we have so that you can start thinking about yourself.
Yeah.
Evolve Ventures has a tremendous amount to offer. Not only do they have an ever-growing but still welcoming private Facebook society full of like-minded individuals, they also offer individual coaching. I myself have been coached by both Bianca and Emilia on separate occasions, and it's amazing to look back even a year ago in my life and see how far I've come. You almost don't notice that you're doing better for yourself over time. Not to mention, Out of the Mud, free live virtual event once a month. Can't think of a better way to spend a Wednesday night. You truly can't encapsulate the value that it carries unless you've been there yourself and been part of the conversations and the connections that happen and just access to that kind of information. The resources are just incredible.
I mean,
One,
no, go ahead.
it's okay. So Elphaba in the movie had Dossa Bear. So like it was an actual bear. The movie's like, it's magical, obviously. She had Dossa Bear. So her dad wanted nothing to do with her. Spoiler alert, wasn't her father. That's why she was green. And he wanted nothing to do with her. When she was born and when she came out, he literally screamed, "Get it out of here." Like, I don't want it, because she was different. They all gasped. So the nanny ended up taking care of her, and she had a stable base regarding that. Then when her sister was born, the dad traumatized the sister because he didn't want her to end up anything like Elphaba. So he made her eat, I don't remember what it was. It was like poppies or something like that. So that she wouldn't end up
Milkweed, I think it was.
milkweed or something like that. He basically forced fed the mother to eat this certain thing to basically make sure that the daughter was white.
Which is just wild because
It's insane.
it just showcases so much of the ignorance of when, and not only the ignorance, but the selfishness that comes and begets parents actually, when their quote unquote child doesn't quote unquote come out the way in which they wanted, right? And one of the core dynamics that was at play with Elphaba and Glinda, Elphaba, from just to kind of comment on that thing at home that you mentioned. Thank goodness she had Elpha Bear, or not Elpha Bear. What's her name? The bears.
It's like Dossa Bear or something.
Dossa Bear. Yeah. So she was that nanny that became the maternal figure that allowed a secure attachment for Elphaba to develop not outside, but pretty much had to develop outside of the core home because the dysfunction at home was so off. And we realized that core dysfunction was ultimately, if you go back to the first film, was because the mother and the father, the governor, were not actually really in love. They really weren't. And so that core dynamic that we say play out in Wicked for Good between Glinda and Elphaba, and what I know a lot of people boohooed and resonated with, and the songs just totally perpetuated this like mourning of what many people have experienced, is Elphaba, she's the one that seeks truth without belonging. She seeks truths and seeks out developing a sense of self at the expense of belonging. Like you saw that in the scene where she was willing, like in Wicked for Good, she literally went out into the forest and had to create her own home without anyone around, without any community, and really live that quote unquote exiled life in quite literal sense. Whereas Glinda really seeks that belonging without any truth.
And fame.
That's the thing. The belonging became, and that's where the girl in the bubble that won several awards in the world at large right now that we're at, because it really, it's not just the fame, but it's this slowly the frog in the boiling water of how once you stay compliant initially, or you seek out that belonging without truth, what that lie spins into becomes just this absolute debauchery of a sense of self, of a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose. And over time, you see Glinda really slide any moral fiber in her body. She's exchanged it just for being accepted and quote unquote loved. It's actually really
everything.
sad.
Yeah, she got everything she wanted. She got power, fame, notoriety. She got adoration and success at the cost of her best friend, who they both saw the evils of what happened. And Glinda told herself a narrative that I'm going to fix this from the inside, and then ended up colluding with Oz and Madame Morrible. She ended up getting sucked into it. And Fiera was like, don't you see like why we started this in the first place? Like at the very beginning of the movie, there's this scene where she's singing to everyone in Oz. And he's like, how are you still stuck in this? Why are you still playing the game? We're trying to...
Yeah.
Why are you still doing the charades? We're trying to get out of this. And she's like, how could anyone deny this? How could anyone not fall for this? And he goes, we both know who could have.
Who could, yeah.
We both know who could, because she was the only one who was really seeking truth. And when you're this truth seeker in your family, you are going, or in any system.
Any system.
You
any,
are going...
Any system of community. Yeah.
You are going to be attacked. You are going to be villainized. All of the powers at play and the powers that be are going to try to cast you as wicked, which is exactly what happened in the film. Elphaba found out the truth, and she wanted to create real sustainable change. And the powers that be basically villainized her, made her seem as though she was wicked, and she ended up having to die in the end because of it. Now, spoiler alert, she didn't end up dying. She figured something out with Fiero that she like hid under a
magnificent.
Vent. Yeah, hid under a vent or something, and they ended up going and living their lives out together. But like
awesome.
They had to go into exile. The truth and the real person who was good had to live her life out in exile so that Glinda could end up being the good person.
Oh, if that doesn't rev your engine, I don't know what will. Because at the end of the day, like Glinda's choices over time, it's very easy to paint her as a villain as well. But she's actually it's adaptive compliance in a nutshell. Whereas in contrast, it's so obvious when you open up your eyes from the psychological perspective. Elphaba, her rebellion, quote unquote, it was really just to try to preserve her identity. What shreds and shards she was able to create as a result of this institutionalized, you mentioned the systems at B, but like this institutionalized moral injury, which is reframing the protection, right? Or the domination that's really happening between Oz and all the animals as protection, right? And Madame Morrible, who I also refer to as Morrible, because I think it sounds really cool, but she, like there was one really powerful scene towards the ending of the first film and just continued to wrap this narrative to the extent where it was just wild. She literally dropped a house on
Nessa,
killing Nessa actually, and created this narrative that Elphaba is the Wicked Witch. And that was really interesting from a psychological perspective to see how bystanders of this, of the quote unquote powers that, by the way, have no power, the narrative making towards violence really does shape and fuel that predisposition that human beings have for aggression. One scene comes to mind where you saw Bach's character literally go into so much hatred and violence to where he's so excited to go and kill the quote unquote Wicked Witch, which that was like very alarming to me, because how many times have we seen that play out in real world where someone actually is really hurt? And by the way, he just has this deep sense of rejection from Glinda. And if you were to watch the film from that standpoint of Bach's rejection and the storyline that takes, there's some deep, deep not enoughness But violence will never satiate that. Killing someone else, killing the Wicked Witch, no matter how quote unquote morally justified to the systems and the institutionalized morality that are at play, will never satiate that quote unquote rejection pain that he had felt from Glinda and then Nessa. And so it's this dance you see of dominance and like ethical cohesion between each character for their own sense of safety and this facade of safety within the group of the community, which is just wild because the moral injuries that we experience through our traumas or whatever experiences we have, that like begets more injury. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that, whether it's silence or whether it's violence or whether it is sitting on the sidelines like Fiyero did for quite some time until he finally bucked up and actually started to see right from wrong. Over time, you just absorb these moral injuries that come from complicit and compliant behavior. But I think one of the things that's fascinating to your point, Bianca, and what you just said, like Elphaba, the one who's actually deeply good and who sees the bigger picture at play, she literally like goes and lives in exile and outs herself from the system to where she literally has to quote unquote design her own death to let the systems just play out and step back. And one of the kind of closing questions on this is, and this is something that so many people have had discussions around, would Glinda really be able to step into her goodness if Elphaba weren't actually to go live in this quote unquote exile? Because to Glinda's awareness, Elphaba's dead. So she actually is living in really the guilt and the shame and all of ultimately the grief, right? This, from my perspective, this entire narrative, it's not ultimately it doesn't create it's not the typical story arc of a hero, right? The hero's journey. It's really not. And it's not a redemption arc at all when it comes to storytelling. It's very much the arc of grief. And when you kind of think about the grief cycle and the emotions that come up, this film really does a beautiful job, in my opinion, really, really conveying how much grief does create transformations, and every single character had that. That doesn't necessarily make you happier, though. On the other side of grief, sometimes it's not happiness, right? It's sometimes just more honesty with yourself. But again, that question becomes, okay, is Glinda more honest? Is she more good? Or what is she more of? So I think it's a fascinating film, and there's so many different avenues that we could continue. But I think that at the end of the day, our psychological analysis can come from so many different elements. I mean, we talked about what are the essence of self that are getting developed? What are the behaviors that are being done to preserve identity or morality or ethics? How does the system at play and the characters and dynamics of the different characters add more depth and more drama to the film? Bach, Nessa, Madame Morrible, the professors, the animals, right? There was a huge mix on animals that we didn't even dip our toe into. The environmental component, just in the underground railroad reference. Oh my goodness. I could go on and on about that. The yellow brick road when they're literally digging. So there's a lot. There's a lot that we covered in this. And hopefully, if you're listening to this towards the end, you're really kind of reflecting on what are some of the parallels between this film and this discussion and what you've experienced as an evolver in your life. Are you that truth teller where you have had to sacrifice, quote unquote, or what has felt like as a result of maybe your family systems and their dysfunction, or the community systems and their dysfunction, or the societal systems and their dysfunction? You've had to sacrifice truth at the expense of belonging. Or are you on more of that alphabet end where you are sacrificing belonging in efforts to preserve truth, in efforts to preserve goodness, in efforts to preserve authenticity?
You and I kind of mentioned this in movie club, and it's an uncomfortable and unfortunate truth, but it is a truth. The majority of the world wants to believe that they're Elphaba. I mean, the amount of people that probably watched that movie and thought, yeah, I'm like Elphaba, I'm speaking for truth. When the reality is the majority of us are like Glinda. There's very few people in this world who actually do, despite themselves, stand up for the truth and for what's right, and are sincerely trying to make this world and other people a better place. And not to say that you have to go to the extreme, that you have to die for a cause, but how many of us are actually embodying good? I wasn't at all. I would have told myself a story back in the day that I was more like Elphaba, and there were parts of me that were, but I didn't have that reserve and that grit and that determination and that sense of self, honestly.
Yeah.
To fight as diligently as she did, to stand up for truth as diligently as she did. Not until Evolve, not until we started this journey together and I really started healing my own traumas and wounds and old narratives and whatnot. And it's a journey that never ends, but don't sell yourself on a lie. We all have to be honest about who we are and where we are, not as an attack, but so that we can become more and more and more and more on the actual side of good. We all want to believe that we're good. Everyone in that movie, they all believed that they were good and that they were righteous and justified in what they were doing and saying. But how many of them actually were? How many of them were actually living for the betterment of themselves and everyone around them? And how many of us in our actual world are doing that? Very few. I wasn't naturally that way, but I'm becoming that way as a byproduct of this journey. And thanks to Emilia. And there's a way to get closer and closer and closer.
It's true. I'm thinking about the power that it takes genuinely. And it's not the like power and like this like bold bravado way that it takes to be on the fringes of the quote unquote community that you aspire to belong to. Right? Whether we think about our family or, our sports teams or our colleagues or whomever it is, right? To speak up and speak out against maybe what we've spoken about, institutionalized moralities and injustices or whatever it is, right? Like it actually takes so much strength to do that. And one of the things that I'm processing from this standpoint now is really that, like, where does Elphaba get her strength to be that strong, to be in exile, to be an outlier, to where literally she's like, at the end of the day, like she will not exchange who she is for this societal quote unquote pressure of compliance and lies and distortion and deceit. And so much respect goes to that character and to that actress who really embodied that, because when I think about it, one of the first thing that comes to my intuition is that she really draws her strength from nature and from the animals and from the earth around her very much. And you'll see that if you were to look at it from that frame, you'll see. And it terrifies me because there are very few people that do have a strong sense of self. But when I do see where they draw their strength from, it is actually also from nature. So what happens when we're not taking care of nature? We're not taking care of our animals. What happens when we're not taking care of the things that actually have the purest form of power that there is, right? It's kind of scary to think about. But closing this episode, when we have transformations and we talk about, like, at Evolve, we talk about transformation. That's a part of this journey. We all have it. Grief absolutely is an emotion that helps to fuel transformation. So is pain. But transformation isn't not necessarily freedom, quote unquote. unless it also includes wholeness. And so as you're on this evolved journey, as you look for and seek out transformations in your own accords, in your own lives, as you seek that strength to be that quote unquote black sheep and embrace that identity or whatever it is for you, please consider how much wholeness is created as well on that journey, because we all do not build this brighter future, this better world as fractured individuals, as a fractured sense of self. So with that being said, I want to close with an episode suggestion and a shout out. So I want to shout out a couple of new subscribers to our podcast, to our episodes. Devil Rocker 3, Jonathan Henley, 9368, Nina Marie Tracier, Brian Portnoy, so many individuals that are in this community that aren't just passively listening, that are actively subscribing to the show. And it's because of you that this platform, what we do here, grows, and we're able to connect with so many incredible humans. So if you are one of those new subscribers and you hear your name, go ahead and comment on this episode. I'm an evolver, and we will send you something for free that is for those who are not just passively listening, but are in fact taking one step further to engage in this community and to really build on that evolved journey that we're all on. And in closing, if you like this episode, my episode suggestion is number 460, how to know if you've ever really been loved, because of the fact that we talk about true power, true sense of strength, and ultimately secure attachment. And at the end of the day, that is love. And love is very much a undertone of so much of this film, which is why it tears our heartstrings apart when we see the lack of it or a pulling of it from the systems at play. Bianca, what are your final comments, takeaways, and episode suggestions?
Something I've learned recently is that really, really good movies tell us about the world that we're living in. And it can help us make sense of the world and ourselves and others. And it can also help us to create really beautiful, meaningful, and sustainable change. And that's what this movie really did for me. It really helped me to see why we're doing what we're doing here in a new light, and why we've made the choices that we've made, and why we've become the women that we've become, and what we're planning on doing in this world. And it's really amazing. And it helped me to get closer to myself. And my invitation for everyone is, go watch the movie again and really look at it from that lens, from all the different lenses that we talked about here. Who are you? Who are you really? And how can you start making small steps toward becoming your most quote unquote good self in whatever way that means for you? My episode suggestion is 459, what your family system role says about you. As we mentioned in the beginning, we're going to do more episodes like this. So we are going to do kind of another one about Avatar, Fire and Ash, which I'm super excited about. I haven't seen it yet. I'm going to be seeing it sometime this week, so I'm pumped. So that'll be a good one. As always, we are super grateful that you joined. Emilia, final sentiment?
Thank you for your interest in the science of holistic mental health. Yes, it does include films, of course. Like Bianca said, we learn ourselves at a deeper level when we have extraordinary films. So shout out to the cast, the crew, all of the creators that were on this incredible project, and for, everything that made the box offices what they were for this film, because it's so exciting to see a piece of work like this ripple out into the masses. So keep evolving, everyone. We appreciate your interest in the science of holistic mental health. We are here for you. We are a DMO way, and we hope that you make the best out of this day. Talk
Bye,
to you
everyone.
soon.